experience with smoking, public opinion has been split into two opposing camps.
A custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and in the black stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless.
When moderately used, there is not in all the world a medicine comparable to tobacco. All of tobacco is wholesome.
Of all the plants grown and used by human beings, not one has sparked controversy like tobacco. You can't eat it, you can't wear it, yet tobacco has changed the world as much as either corn or cotton. In fact, without tobacco, perhaps the United States might never have existed at all. Christopher Columbus recorded in his log that the natives carried a lighted brand whose aroma it was their custom to suck. It was a member of his crew, Rodrigo de Jerez, who became the first European smoker in history, but certainly not the last.
Tobacco from very early on was central to the economy of the South and indeed of the middle colonies. Tobacco played such a central role that it was a medium of exchange, like a form of currency.
I say, if you can't send money, send tobacco.
But it was the Civil War that really changed things.
All these soldiers milling around in at Durham Station, Sherman's army, they discovered that this very pleasant bright leaf tobacco, which they used for smoking tobacco mostly, pipes, and chewing tobacco. So that a market did begin to develop rather quickly.
Union soldiers took home stories of the golden leaf. Those stories were the first form of tobacco advertising, and they would change forever our state, our nation, and a country farmer named Washington Duke. After the South's surrender, Washington Duke, farmer, soldier, and former prisoner of war, walked home with 50 cents in his pocket. The region's economy was in ruins, and Duke found almost everything of value on his farm gone, except for a wagon load of tobacco and 2 blind mules.
He comes back to the farm, which today we call the homestead, and tries to pick up where he left off, but somehow he made the decision that the smart thing for him to do would be to go into the home manufacturing of smoking tobacco. That he would put his young children to work helping to flail this tobacco into smaller pieces, hire some help if necessary, and then he would peddle smoking tobacco.
Soon he converted a small barn on his property into the first tobacco factory. In 2 years, Duke built another, larger factory to keep up with the demand for his processed tobacco. Before long, he moved his growing business into town, and within 40 years, the company Washington Duke started out of the back of a wagon became the largest tobacco empire in the world, thanks in large part to this, the Bonsack cigarette-making machine. Before James Bonsack invented the rolling machine, cigarettes were rolled by hand. A fast roller could make 2,000 cigarettes in one day. Bonsack's machine could roll 120,000 a day, or as many as 60 of the best workers. By the turn of the 20th century, cigarettes had begun to replace cigars in popularity, especially among young men and women. This rise in smoking concerned some people so much that cigarettes were declared illegal in 14 states. But smoking would not be stopped. The cigarette revolution had begun, and the Duke family was right in the center of everything.
The gamble that the Dukes took on machine-made cigarettes was the secret of the phenomenal rise then of Washington Duke Sons and Company. And the best evidence seems to be that it was this youngest son of Washington Dukes, whom the family called Buck. And now that he's so dead, we all call him Buck. But people didn't do that in his lifetime, let me assure you. But it was Buck Duke who persuaded his father and his older brother Ben and their partner George Watts that they should gamble on this bonsai machine.
By 1889, Washington Duke's son, James Buchanan Duke, was the head of the American Tobacco Company, the largest tobacco company in the world. The tobacco industry needed power, water, and cotton sacks. This led the Dukes and other families to build roads, power plants, and textile mills. Prosperity and much of the South's economy came roaring back, thanks largely to the success of locally grown tobacco. When the United States entered World War I, cigarettes were such a big part of a soldier's life that General Black Jack Pershing, commander of American forces in France, cabled Washington,
"Tobacco is as indispensable as the daily ration. We must have thousands of tons of it without delay."
At the end of the war, veterans returned home and they brought their cigarette habit with them. It was the beginning of the Jazz Age, when flappers and their bows danced through a cloud of cigarette smoke, and through it all, the Duke family prospered. In Durham in 1924, Buck Duke endowed Duke University and constructed a campus that looked as if it had been around for centuries. But along with the factories and the fortunes, something else was in the wind. Another industry was making money on little more than smoke and a smile. The modern advertising industry was born, and Buck Duke used advertising to sell cigarettes by the millions. He was a marketing genius, and in a few short years, his brands were known around the world.
Buck Duke was probably the first practitioner of what we know today as branding, where instead of going into a tobacco shop and asking for a pack of cigarettes, you actually go in and ask for a Lucky Strike. This was really brought about by the amount of money he spent in his advertising, much more than any of his competitors had spent before him, and he really cornered the market. One of the more interesting things that he did in advertising is he used cards in the cigarette packs to actually stiffen the packs. But on the cards he had printed collectible pictures of actresses and acrobats, any women that he could put in rather revealing costumes. And he kept this up, and millions of Americans collected these cards. And he kept this up until his father, Washington Duke, sent him a letter, and he had gotten a letter himself from a minister asking that maybe the Dukes would refrain from using lascivious pictures, is how he called them, how he referred to them, lascivious pictures of young ladies. So after that, Buck Duke started using pictures of baseball players, other athletes, and that's what became baseball cards that we know today.
Still, not every American was sold on the benefits of smoking.
The cigarette has a violent action in the nerve centers, producing degeneration of the brain. This degeneration is permanent and uncontrollable.
Giving up smoking is easy. I've personally done it 100 times.
But as tobacco changed the world, it practically defined life in North Carolina.
It is true. From the period when the tobacco plants are set in the field, there is no resting time until it's housed.
Working tobacco when I was a young'un, we had to work from sun up to sundown. And there was no Pepsi Colas and no ham biscuits and things of that nature. It was hard.
Sometimes it was after sundown too, and before sun up.
Many North Carolina children spent their summers working the tobacco fields, causing more than one to wish they were back in school. But once the tobacco was harvested and cured, then came the most exciting time of the year. A time that was a carnival, Christmas, and your birthday all rolled into one. For towns like Durham, the entire economy was dependent on tobacco, and the market was the high point of the year. It meant payday, shopping, and shows. What a time it was. The highlight of the market was the auction, when farmers would sell their tobacco to the big cigarette companies.
It was just a busy, busy time, and it was an exciting time, and you looked forward to coming to work every day, and we rang the Liberty Bell before our sales started, and we would go at it. And you'd sell probably 500 tiles an hour moving along. It was a fast-paced operation, and there's nothing else in the auction world akin to selling tobacco. It turned loose a lot of money in Durham, North Carolina. From 6 in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night, you were busy, working every day. And it was hot and dusty, and it's a wonder many of us survived, but a few did.
And wherever people and money came together, the entertainers followed. In Durham, musicians like Blind Boy Fuller, Gary Davis, and Sonny Terry played for the crowds gathered outside the warehouses.
This music was variously known as East Coast, Ragtime, or Piedmont Blues, as distinct from the Delta Blues in Mississippi or Chicago Blues. And it's a ragtime piano-influenced guitar style that became popular around the turn of the century when Joplin rags were starting to hit across the country, changing dance styles and rhythmic styles. Durham was the last southern home for Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee and Reverend Gary Davis, who all went to New York City in 1942. And as such, it was the last great bastion of Piedmont blues.
In cities like Durham and Winston-Salem, cigarette factories employed thousands of people, and their pay supported almost every aspect of the community. The wealth brought by tobacco was the foundation of the state's economy. And following the Duke family's philanthropic example, individuals and corporations donated millions to build hospitals, museums, schools, and theaters. Everywhere you look, you can see how tobacco changed our streets, our skyline, and even our sports. Tobacco made some families wealthy beyond imagination, helped educate generations of young people, and transformed Durham into the Bull City, named for an early brand, Bull Durham. Bull Durham also gave baseball the bullpen, named for a Bull Durham ad that stood over the spot where pitchers warmed up before taking the mound. But nothing ever stays the same. Tobacco, the state, and the city faced changes that old Washington Duke could never have predicted. In 1964, the Surgeon General of the United States linked cigarette smoking with cancer and in less than 10 years, cigarette advertising would be taken off television and radio. Within a generation, smoking would be banned in workplaces and public buildings. Tobacco would continue to be a major economic influence in American life, but the way it did business would be changed forever. Even Durham, once the Bull City, changed its name to the City of Medicine, and the auction houses that once rang with the noise of a crowded market found new life as shops and luxury apartments. The factories that manufactured cigarettes for the world are silent, replaced by new industry, and the aroma of the golden leaf that once sweetened the city's air is just a memory. But if you know where to look, you'll see that the positive changes brought by tobacco from Duke University to the city's grand old neighborhoods will be with us for a very long time.